Chinese Premier Li Keqiang outlines the country's development agenda for 2019. The latest effort to stabilize Libya gets underway in the Egyptian capital. And the son of Liberia's former president, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, has been charged with economic sabotage. Hello and welcome to CGTN. This is Africa Live and I'm Karen Roberts in Nairobi. Also coming up in the programme. In business, Rwanda partially opens its borders with Uganda after a week-long dispute. And France and Egypt hold their first joint military drill using the French-made Rafale jets. We begin in Beijing, where the Chinese Premier has delivered the government work report to this year's gathering of the National People's Congress. The second session of the 13th NPC began this morning in Beijing. Li Keqiang listed measures and targets to stabilize the economy and improve social well-being. He admitted that there are challenges ahead, but laid out how they will be addressed. CGTN's Hu Na reports now from the Great Hall of the People in Beijing.
Setting the tone for the country's development. Premier Li Keqiang set the GDP growth target for this year at between 6% and 6.5%. He looked back at what's been achieved. GDP grew by 6.6% last year, exceeding 90 trillion yuan. He admits the country faces mounting uncertainties in the international economic landscape. He called for more innovation and vowed to deepen reform in various sectors.
We deepened reforms of state capital and state-owned enterprises and made new gains in upgrading and restructuring SOEs and in improving their quality and performance. In addressing difficulties and issues encountered by the private sector, we used every feasible means to help them address problems.
In addition to the overall macroeconomy, the work report also reiterates the government's commitment to the state-owned enterprise reform and the support for the private sectors, in particular, the funding available for small and medium-sized enterprises.
I hope the government can reduce tax and fees on small and medium-sized enterprises so that they can make profits.
I hope the measures on easing the business environment for small and medium-sized enterprises could be implemented in full.
In laying out future tasks, Premier Li vowed larger-scale tax cuts. The government will deepen the value-added tax reform, reducing the current rate of 16% in manufacturing and other industries to 13%, and lower the rate in transportation, construction, and other industries from 10 to 9%. He promised to further open up and foster international economic cooperation and competition.
We will open more sectors and improve the scope of opening up, continue to promote opening up based on flows of goods and factors of production, and give greater emphasis to opening up based on rules and related institutions.
Policymakers will seek to create 11 million jobs this year, and the surveyed unemployment rate in urban areas will be kept at around 5.5%. The spillover effect of interest rate hikes in the United States and uncertainties arising from trade disputes among major powers risk driving down global economic and trade growth this year. Li admits that China, as a result, will face challenges, making these targets set today all the more important. Hu Na, CGTN, Beijing.
Meanwhile, the very first NPC deputy passage interview was held this morning prior to the opening meeting of the second session of the 13th National People's Congress. 8 NPC deputies answered questions from media at the passage interview area, touching upon some of China's major development plans. Tang Bo has more.
The first day of China's NPC session brings with it lots of questions for the nation's top legislators. Chen Gang, secretary of the CPC Party Working Committee of Xiong'an New Area, was among the first to answer. When asked about the development of the new area in Hebei province, Chen said the area's overall planning is complete except for its construction.
We will adhere to open and market-oriented approaches when building the new area and make full use of market forces in allocating resources based on the rules of urban planning and construction.
The Greater Bay Area Plan, another of China's major development projects, also came up. The Vice Governor of Guangdong Province, along with deputies from Hong Kong and Macau, sang the area's praises.
Hong Kong and Macau enjoy a high level of marketisation and openness, which will help Guangdong Province deepen its reform and enhance its opening up. At the same time, the large market in the Greater Bay Area will provide Hong Kong and Macau with more development opportunities.
Representing China's grassroots populations, delegates from southern China's Hubei province and Chongqing municipality talked about livelihood projects regarding environmental protection and poverty alleviation. TCL Group CEO Li Dongsheng talked about leveling the playing field of competition for all sorts of business, including in the private economy. So from the list, we can see that the NPC session this time made the arrangement in answer to the public concerns of some of China's major development plans. In the following days, more NPC deputies will show up at the passage interview, showing their voices and telling their stories. Tambo, CGTN, Beijing.
Well, as you've heard there, China's National People's Congress has kicked off with a packed agenda. Let's now go live to Beijing for the latest on this.
Thank you very much, Nairobi. We know this morning Chinese Premier Li Keqiang delivered a government work report and basically covering all wide of issues and basically reviewed it to 2018 and set up the plan for 2019. And joining me here is our CGTN's Nairobi-based correspondent Wu Qi. Thank you very much for joining me here, Wu Qi.
Thank you, Lian Yang.
Okay, so let's cut to the chase. And in the past few days, you have spoken with NPC delegate and the CPPCC members. And this morning at the Great Hall of the People, you've spoken with ambassadors from Africa. And just for my own curiosity, what were their biggest concerns and the focuses for this year's two sessions?
Well, as you know, Liu Yang, much like the rest of the world, Africa was quite focused and curious about China's policy direction, especially as it pertains to improving the business environment. Now, of course, they expressed to me, I actually spoke with representatives from Sudan and Ethiopia, and they expressed to me their happiness to hear from Premier Li Keqiang that China is actually going to push forward its initiative to open its economy further. They talked about the fact that it looks like that foreign investment law will be beneficial for the continent, given the fact that it pledges to remove or rather take down those controls towards which, of course, have impacted investors. As we know, as trade between Africa and the continent has grown, many of them have set up shop, many of Africans have set up shop on the continent, and they complain about quite bureaucratic processes. So, of course, the law also promises to protect investors' rights, their interests, as well as intellectual property going forward. And of course, that's a huge thing for African companies looking to set up in here in China.
Yes, exactly. I'm totally with you. You know, Chinese President Xi Jinping says China will further open up its market to foreign investors. I think that's why, that's because China is transforming itself from the biggest country of manufacturing to the biggest country of innovation. And China is also changing, you know, the economic growth from the high-speed economic growth to high-quality growth. You're right. And so I think the adoption of the foreign investment law is certainly the innovation in the legal system.
Quite right. And another area that was key for foreign investors who were watching the NPC this time around was China's growth projections moving forward. Of course, we heard Li Keqiang, 6 to 6.5%. And especially for Africa as a continent, we know that it will be certainly heavily hit by a slowdown in China's economy. I'll give you some figures. China holds Africa's fourth largest stock of foreign direct investment at about $40 billion US. Of course. So Africa does rely on China in terms of demand in the commodity space as well. China is a huge consumer consumer of our commodities. So that's one area that, of course, Africans were watching quite closely.
So let's talk about the Belt and Road Initiative. You're quite familiar with that topic, Gucci. And as we know, the Belt and Road Initiative have benefited many people, billions of people in the world, especially in African countries. And many African workers said, they have found a job because, some of the Chinese companies have invested heavily in African countries. And I think, for example, one of the projects is Nairobi Mombasa Railway Project. It actually created 50,000 jobs. That's incredible.
There's no doubt that Africa has been a huge beneficiary of China's infrastructure boom that we've seen over the past few decades. Some figures say that China is the most visible single country funder and builder of infrastructure on the African continent. So certainly, as we move forward with the Belt and Road Initiative, and one thing Premier Li Keqiang talked about was the fact that he plans to push this forward.
So I think you're right. I think that essence of the Belt and Road Initiative is about connectivity of the world economy. That's why Chinese President Xi Jinping initiated this Belt and Road Initiative, right? And let's talk a little bit about the poverty alleviation in China. Well, actually, Premier Li Keqiang also mentioned many things about this. China will wipe out completely the poverty by 2020. That's a huge task for China.
And of course, one thing he did mention is the fact that fiscal revenues in 2019 were going to be slowing down, and of course, the government is going to need to increase funding to various sectors and considerably as well.
Farmers' income in the rural area remains one of the most daunting tasks in China to build a moderately prosperous society, and China also plans to invest heavily in rural areas, especially in the areas still in the deep poverty. And I think, in January, China released the #1 central government. It says, central report, It says China will encourage veterans, migrant workers, and students to get back to the rural area to create businesses to boost the local economy.
So definitely, those were some of the top topics discussed at the national political.
I think that's. Yes, you're right. I think that's just the tip of the iceberg of this year's government report. In my hand, this is some of the points of this year's government report, and we counted it's about 66 points for 2019. That's a huge task for China. Get back to you.
I think the line actually.
Okay, well, thank you there too. That was Uche Okoronkwo there, along with Liu Yang. And of course, they are following this year's gathering of the National People's Congress, the 13th National People's Congress. Moving back on to this continent now, Egypt is hosting an Arab ministerial meeting to discuss the situation in Libya and the long-awaited elections. The meeting brings together the foreign ministers of Egypt, Algeria and Tunisia. The last such meeting was held in Algiers in May 2018. Well, the three countries then agreed to continue supporting the implementation of the UN peace plan. For the very latest on this meeting, let's now cross over to Cairo, where CGTN's Adel El Marouhi is standing by. So, Adel, who's attending this latest forum to address the conflict in Libya, and what are the key items on the agenda?
The Egyptian foreign minister with his Tunisian and Algerian counterparts have been for several years been holding a trilateral meeting. It's more or less a routine meeting between the three countries that have the major borders with Libya and all the Arab neighbors to the troubled country. And they have been routinely meeting so that they can manage to cooperate on the Libyan crisis, to work together to put a solution and make sure that they are all on the same side or on the same page when it comes to Libya. So today they will be discussing the security concerns, the latest developments on the ground in Libya itself. They will be, of course, discussing the agreement between General Khalifa Haftar and Faiz al-Sarraj, the head of the government backed by the United Nations. The two Libyan rivals have agreed in the United Arab Emirates on an agenda. Once again, they reconfirmed their commitment to have elections and form and move forward to a unity government. This have, of course, been a repetitive agreement that we've seen last year, and the elections that should have happened late in 2018 have been postponed to 2019. It's still not clear how the political movement will go, but these are the main points that Egypt, Tunisia and Algeria are quite keen on. They want to see a stable political situation in Libya that will boost the stability and security on their borders.
And Adel, what needs to be done to overcome political differences to allow a credible election to take place in Libya?
Well, there needs to be a will first from the rival governments, the eastern government in Tobruk, which backs the Libyan National Army led by General Khalifa Haftar. This side, the eastern side of the country, is backed by Egypt, by UAE, Saudi Arabia, and some global powers as well. On the other hand, we have the rival government, Faiz al-Sarraj, backed mainly by many European powers and by the United Nations as well. Both of them don't seem to be agreeing on key issues. The existence of General Khalifa Haftar itself has been quite a concern for the western side. Khalifa Haftar has many opposition coalitions in the western side in Tripoli, and this has been a key measure. Will Khalifa Haftar be part of a government, a unity government that will follow, will be allowed to run for the presidency of the country or not? And the eastern side has full support to him. This comes in a critical time as well, because the LNA forces have been marching quite steadily and have been expanding their outreach and control over the Libyan borders. Just this weekend, they've announced controlling the entire Libyan borders with Egypt in the east, with Chad, Niger, and the southwest, and Algeria's the southwestern side. So all what they have remain is the Tunisian borders, which is a part where the western side comes. And I've been trying to investigate the supports itself that Libya is getting and the significance of that achievement in this report. Let's have a listen.
Officially, the Libyan National Army is in a hunt for terrorist groups in Libya's south. But this claimed chase for militants has helped the LNA to expand control over Libyan territories. They have claimed full control over the borders with Algeria, Niger and Chad, thanks to one loyal ally, Egypt.
Egypt publicly announced its support for the Libyan National Army and backs its fight against terrorist groups in Libya. Egypt has provided huge support to the LNA forces. With this support, the forces have managed to get rid of Islamists in Benghazi, in Derna, and in the oil fields. Egypt's help surpasses what is publicly announced. It is undeniable that without Egypt, Khalifa Haftar would not have managed to make such progress.
General Khalifa Haftar's forces may not be far from extending their reach to the western border with Tunisia. LNA has earlier publicly announced its intention to reach the headquarters of their rival government in Tripoli.
One of the main targets of Khalifa Haftar's mission is to reach Tripoli. He did not go to the south to stay there. He is just cutting down the lines of communication and supply to the militias which back the government in Tripoli. He managed to gain the allegiance of the tribes in the south. He has gained strategic advantage by controlling borders with 4 countries.
It is not clear how many LNA troops remained in the cities it claimed in the south. Control over territories in Libya can shift from day to day. So the question of how long can Haftar keep these towns on his side remains with no definite answer.
LNA forces claim that they have entered the South Libyan towns without any resistance from the locals. In Tripoli, however, General Khalifa Haftar has many rival coalitions. Some of them have labeled him a war criminal. Experts fear that if the LNA do march towards Tripoli, that may fuel one of the deadliest clashes Libya could see. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo. So this is still a big question, will the General Khalifa Haftar forces move toward Tripoli or not? They said that they want to enter without clashes, without any tension with the western side. And if that happens, if they start to take any further steps in the western territories controlled by the Islamist coalitions and Faiz al-Sarraj, that may put the latest agreement of reaching political solution that both Haftar and Sarraj have agreed upon in UAE, may put it in jeopardy and may, for once again, elongate the political crisis in Libya.
Okay, thank you very much for that update. That was Adel El Mahrouki there in Cairo following the latest forum to address the conflict in Libya. Moving on to other news now, Algerian president's bid for a fifth term has sparked mixed reactions across the country. In a written message to the nation, Bouteflika said if he was re-elected, he would promote political changes and call an early presidential election, which he would not run. He also promised to fight corruption and to create better opportunities for Algerians. However, critics have described the offer as a ploy to remain in power. His decision has also sparked nationwide protests. Some residents in Algiers are backing him, while others are against Bouteflika's participation in the April vote.
I think we should wait a year or so and go towards this democratic change that is offered to us. If we destroy the state institutions and let the army take power, we are going to see a not good situation, and we surely don't need that. We should wait a bit, a year or so, for the president to do the changes he said he will.
We are part of a process which is beyond the power. We are not reacting, we are actually acting in action towards structural change, a radical change of the current political regime.
Well, we are going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including the son of Liberia's former president, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, has been charged with economic sabotage. And France and Egypt hold their first joint military drill using the French-made Rafale jets.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Five former senior figures at the Liberian Central Bank, including the son of ex-President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, have been charged with criminal conspiracy and economic sabotage. This follows a probe into how banknotes worth $102 million, which were printed in Sweden, had gone missing during transfer to the Liberian Central Bank. A court in Monrovia heard that between 2016 and 2018, Charles Sirleaf, who was the deputy governor of the bank, conspired with other officials to print the local currency, but also to pocket some of the proceeds. The men have been held in jail pending the scheduling of their trial. Liberia has been struggling with rampant corruption, which President George Weah vowed to combat when he took office a year ago. South Sudan's President Salva Kiir has hosted Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and Eritrean President Isaias Afwerki in Juba. South Sudan's government says the three leaders pledged to work together to ensure peace and economic prosperity in their nations. CGTN's Patrick Hoyt now reports.
The visit by the heads of state for Ethiopia and Eritrea comes just 2 months before South Sudan is meant to form a unity government It's one of the conditions of the peace deal signed last year between President Salva Kiir and major opposition parties. But there are still groups opposed to the peace agreement, and those groups are fighting against the current government. Now Ethiopia and Eritrea say they want to help bring all fighting factions together in the peace process, and they will consolidate their efforts to ensure this happens. And South Sudan's government has promised it will now begin negotiations with opposition groups.
There's going to be a meeting that will bring together Ambassador Ismail Wise, the special envoy of IGAD to the Republic of South Sudan, with one of the holdout groups that is led by General Thomas Cirillo. This will take place in Addis. That will be followed by another similar meeting with the group led by Paul Malong on the 10th in Nairobi.
President Kiir says his government remains committed to the implementation of the peace deal, and the three leaders have pledged more regional integration to make this happen. But many question these assurances from the government, given the country's recent history. In 2015, a peace agreement failed to produce any results, despite promises from all parties that they would honor its conditions. One of the challenges for South Sudan's peace process now is to ensure the deal doesn't collapse. But history has shown that groups left out of the peace implementation have in the past opted for armed rebellion. And experts argue that unless all groups are included in the most recent peace process, there is a real risk it could fail. To stop that from happening, Juba hopes leaning on neighboring countries like Ethiopia and Eritrea will help end the violence and create a stable environment for South Sudan's citizens. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Well, we are now joined on the phone by CGTN correspondent Patrick Oyet to give us more details on these developments. Patrick, we understand that the African Union's Peace and Security Council will be visiting South Sudan. What more can you tell us?
Yes, the delegation actually of African Union Peace and Security Council is already here in Juba. They arrived this morning, 11 a.m. local time, and they are actually going to be here for 4 days. Their schedule is full. They are meeting government officials, that is South Sudan government officials. After that, they are scheduled to meet United Nations mission in South Sudan officials. They are also meeting the African Union body, which is mandated to monitor the South Sudan peace process, that is known as Reconstituted Joint Monitoring and Evaluation Commission. They'll be meeting those officials. They are meeting also civil society. They are meeting other stakeholders in the South Sudan peace process, and they are also scheduled to go here. Here is actually a border in Uganda, and that is an area where clashes have happened recently between one of the holdout groups led by General Thomas Cirillo with the government forces just last week. So they are also visiting that area to at least go and find out for themselves what is taking place. And of course, we've also heard that General Thomas Cirillo is now ready to negotiate with the government and perhaps join the unity government. So basically, the AU or African Union Peace and Security Council delegation, which is here, is to push forward the peace deal implementation. There is a real fear that the peace deal could collapse if at all groups are left out, those that have been fighting the government, because as it has been witnessed here, many a times whenever there is a group left out, you find this group might be small, but many people who oppose the government keep joining them, and then the war becomes a bigger war. So at this time, all efforts are being made by the African Union, the East African Regional Body, or IGAD, to make sure that all groups are included, because we are only 2 months away from the scheduled formation of the unity government, which is supposed to be formed in May. So it is hoped that all these efforts they are making would include all those groups that are still not part of the current peace deal, such that when a government is formed in May, all of them are actually included. And the AU team, which is here, they are scheduled to leave Juba on Friday this week.
And Patrick, leaders from Ethiopia and Eritrea have also been to Juba. What kind of support does South Sudan need to re-energize the peace deals which were signed last year?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of effort that is needed to help South Sudan move the peace process forward. One of them, of course, is the issue of funding, which the government here and also the other parties to the peace deal have been crying for. They're saying they don't have the funding to implement the peace deal. So definitely a country like, neighboring countries like Eritrea, Ethiopia would help in, for example, lobbying more for funds from the international donors to help the peace process. Also by the virtue of the fact that they come here and assure the people of South Sudan that they are ready to work for peace in South Sudan in itself. It's very important to assure the people of South Sudan, who are very skeptical now because of the past experiences they've had where a peace deal is signed, parties communicate, say they would implement, and the deal finally collapses. So for them coming here, assuring people that they're ready to work to make sure that peace returns to the country is good for the people. And also for those who are fighting, it is a message to them that, the whole region now wants peace in this country. So perhaps the best option is to go to the table and talk and come back to also join the peace process. And of course, their coming here has resulted into something that we have now, that the next is going to be a meeting with one of the groups that is still fighting the government in Ethiopia. After that, there will be another meeting with another group which is fighting the government in Nairobi. So all these are aimed at bringing peace to South Sudan. Then, of course, they also talk of economic integration, because there were some major infrastructure projects that were there between, for example, South Sudan and Ethiopia, where they signed deals to construct roads in some parts of South Sudan. There were supposed to be some oil refineries which were also supposed to supply Ethiopia. So all these projects have stalled because of the conflict. So then coming and assuring the people of South Sudan that they are ready to work for peace is going to help. And I think more of assurances will help re-energize the South Sudanese parties to ensure that they implement the peace deal, to show that nobody in the region is supporting any opposition or any war or any chaos in the country. The only option they have is to make sure the peace process moves forward. That is how people are looking at it here.
OK, Patrick, thank you. That was CGTN correspondent Patrick Oyet there, giving us more details on developments there. And apologies for the poor quality of the line. Moving on to other news, France and Egypt are holding their first joint military drill using the French-made Rafale fighter jets. French pilots have been leading the training of the Egyptian air forces since Egypt received its first batch in 2017. CGTN's Adel El Marouhi has more.
A formation of French Rafale Dassault fighter jets have arrived to a military airport in Egypt. It's part of the first Air Force drills Egypt hosts that includes the French-made military aircrafts. The exercises began with theoretical sessions to standardize terms and exchange expertise.
This military drill follows the full delivery of the Rafale jets Egypt has purchased from France. The Egyptian army has been renovating its arms infrastructure generally and the Air Force specifically. French military delegations have praised the skills of the Egyptian Air Force fighters. When Rafale first came, a French pilot accompanied the Egyptian pilot. Now Egyptians fully operate the jets independently.
Rafales are the latest addition to the Egyptian Air Force. Egypt has signed a contract to purchase 24 of these long-range multitasking fighter jets from France. They empower Cairo to engage in overseas military interventions.
Egypt's national security begins with the security of its neighboring countries. Rafale fighter jets help Egypt step up to support its brotherly countries. Its long range can help Egypt reach the sources of the Nile. F-16s couldn't help Egyptian fighters reach the source of the Nile and return how the Rafale have enabled the Egyptian army to do so from a base in the south or from Sudan. It's also very effective in counter-terrorism.
Egyptian and French troops have practiced various forms of airstrikes operation and planning. This joint drill aims to enhance cooperation between the two countries in maintaining regional stability.
Military cooperation between Egypt and France is at its highest levels. During the past 5 years, Cairo has purchased arms from Paris in deals estimated at around $10 billion. Alongside the ongoing military Air Force exercises, the two countries are also holding naval drills that includes Egypt's French Mistral helicopter carriers. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
A recap of our top stories now. Chinese Premier has delivered the government work report to this year's gathering of the National People's Congress. The second session of the 13th NPC began this morning in Beijing. Li Keqiang listed measures and targets to stabilize the economy and improve social well-being. He admitted that there are challenges ahead, but laid out how they will be addressed. Egypt is hosting an Arab ministerial meeting to discuss the situation in Libya and the long-awaited elections. The meeting brings together the foreign ministers of Egypt, Algeria and Tunisia. The last such meeting was held in Algiers in May 2018. The three countries then agreed to continue supporting the implementation of the UN peace plan. 5 former senior figures at the Liberian Central Bank, including the son of ex-President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, have been charged with criminal conspiracy and economic sabotage. This follows a probe into how banknotes worth $102 million, which were printed in Sweden, had gone missing during transfer to the Liberian Central Bank. Charles Sirleaf was the deputy governor of the central bank. And France and Egypt are holding their first joint military drill using the French-made Rafale fighter jets. French pilots have been leading the training of the Egyptian Air Forces since Egypt received its first batch in 2017. And those are the top stories that we're covering for you. Well, we are going to a short break now. We've got all the business news coming up, including Rwanda partially opens its borders with Uganda after a week-long dispute. And the US extends sanctions on Zimbabwe by another year.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's begin in Rwanda. The country has started to allow trucks carrying goods from Uganda to enter one of the main border crossing points. Rwanda had abruptly blocked cargo trucks from Uganda. It sparked a diplomatic spat between the two countries. Well, according to Uganda's government spokesman, the flow of cargo has been eased at Marama Hills. That's one of the 3 main border crossings. Uganda has denied alleged arbitrary detentions of Rwandans. Both countries have long-standing mistrust and have occasionally traded allegations of supporting dissidents. Meanwhile, the US President Donald Trump has extended sanctions against Zimbabwe by 1 year. President Trump argues that the new government's policies pose an unusual and extraordinary threat to US foreign policy. The renewal comes despite calls by African leaders to lift the sanctions and give the country a chance to turn its economy around. According to Trump's administration officials, the sanctions will remain until the government changes the laws restricting media freedom and protests. Former President Robert Mugabe and President Mnangagwa are also currently under US sanctions. African finance ministers and experts have begun a 5-day meeting in Cameroon's capital, Yaoundé. The forum aims to engage on policy action and measures required to transform the continent. The seminar, themed Public Policies for Productive Transformation, seeks to also diversify imports and exports as well as technology upgrades. Resolutions reached at the meeting are expected to be forwarded to the African Union Summit in July for consideration and approval.
The theme of this meeting, namely public policies for productive transformation, is in that wake geared towards ensuring the radical transformation of our economic model inherited from colonization and rests on exporting unprocessed material and has shown all its limitations and shortcomings. The general and overall result exports are known, which to say that Africa has no other choice than to accelerate the domestic processing of its domestic commodities and to reduce its dependency on massive import of external goods, which, as you know, may produce perverse effects on monetary matters and on public finance in particular.
Cigarette maker British American Tobacco has increased pressure against a proposed law to control usage of tobacco products within Kenya's capital in Nairobi. According to the company, the draft law would bring about negative unintended consequences. City authorities have proposed a law that seeks to enforce restrictions on smoking in public spaces. Campaigners fighting the tobacco trade have petitioned the Ministry of Health to enforce the Tobacco Control Act, citing health benefits over commercial gain. The Tobacco Bill 2018 criminalises the sale of tobacco products to under 18-year-olds. It also bans selling tobacco in public spaces, while those who flout this clause are liable for a 6-month jail term and a fine of 50,000 shillings. On to Somalia now, and the country is seeking to attract more foreign investors in its booming construction industry, among other areas. CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo caught up with a group of businessmen from Egypt at a recently concluded expo in the Somali capital, Mogadishu.
These Egyptian investors are in Somalia to boost trade relations between the two Arab League members. Leading construction companies are among those that attended this expo in Mogadishu. Abdulrahman Ilmi is the managing director of Green Modeling Contracting, a multi-billion-dollar construction company that has embarked on mega projects in Egypt and the Middle East. Ilmi says his company hopes to invest in the construction projects in most parts of Somalia, as the Horn of Africa nation seeks to rebuild key roads and major transit hubs destroyed during the civil war.
We're already working in Egypt, and we're working in KSA and UAE, Dubai, and UK. Between Somalia and Egypt, it's good relation. And in Egyptian good, the Somali it's good, no problem. Now the safety it's good in Somalia, and very potential here, because the oil project and mega project here, and the potential is very good. And inshallah we open the branch here to make some project here.
Somalia mainly imports medicine, foodstuffs, heavy machinery and construction materials from Egypt. Business companies from both countries have established the Egypt-Somalia Investment Partnership, a platform that seeks to rekindle a decades-long trade cooperation between Cairo and Mogadishu.
The relation between Egypt and Somalia is fantastic since ever, and it's historical as well. So back to the pharaohs, Hatshepsut, the queen. So we are here just to retain the relation with Somalia, because Somalia also has a very strategic location in Africa. And personally, I believe in Somalia will be booming very much in the coming 10 to 20 years. We are here today just to offer you our experience, and maybe we can imitate it a little bit. So we are looking for local suppliers and local partners in Somalia to work with us in the mega projects.
The North African nation has also expressed interest in livestock trade, Somalia's principal source of revenue. Since 2016, Somali traders have been exporting camels to Egypt, among other Arab countries. And with newfound stability, experts say that trade volumes between the two countries were likely to boost in the coming years.
Egypt is one of the main trade partners to Somalia. And according to the official numbers, last year the trade volume between the two countries was about $100 million. And we expect this number to double or triple in the coming few years, as we see a lot of Egyptian companies coming to Somalia recently.
Egyptian investors have also expressed interest in capitalizing on the fishing industry, as they plan to establish trade centers for their goods here in the capital, Mogadishu. Cairo also provides scholarship opportunities each year to students as part of its assistance program to Somalia. Several schools in the country also practice the Egyptian education curriculum. Since taking office in 2017, Somali President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo has visited Cairo on several occasions to boost bilateral ties and urged for more investment in his country as it seeks to strengthen its weak economy and create more job opportunities for its youthful population. Abdulaziz Bilal, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
We're going to a short break now. We've got lots more to come, including a tribute to the legendary South African musician and activist Miriam Makeba.
When you look at Africa, what do you really see? Do you see fast-growing, endless deserts and parched earth? Or do you see the biggest opportunity for an agricultural revolution in a generation? Do you see crowded, unplanned cities or vast, untapped markets? Do you see a population at risk, or do you see a billion-strong opportunity to grow the next wave of multi-billion-dollar firms in Africa? When you look at Africa, what do you really see? Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
To South Africa now, and the country has paid tribute to legendary musician and activist Miriam Makeba. Mama Africa, as she was affectionately known, was a singer, an actress, United Nations Goodwill Ambassador and a struggle activist. She died in 2008. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
Zenzile Miriam Makeba was born on 4 March 1932. She died in November 2008 in Italy after suffering a heart attack following a concert performance. A legend in South Africa, the African continent and the world, Mama Makeba's powerful, distinctive voice and fresh approach to mixing traditional African music with newer jazz sounds propelled her to great heights. Mama Makeba's impact went beyond the musical and cultural arena, spreading to humanitarian, political, and educational issues. She used her voice to draw the attention of the world to the injustices of apartheid. The University of South Africa, UNISA, and the Institute for Dispute Resolution in Africa hosted this event to honor the music legend, to also showcase a documentary about Mama Makeba's life.
Refusing to comply, they sent an answer. That's when the policeman came to the rescue.
The documentary was followed by an intergenerational dialogue between her peers and the younger generation.
Musicians are powerful and phenomenal because they have transcended the denotative, the personal, and the literal. They have assumed another form which entitles them to, knowingly and unknowingly, to inform and direct society. Because they are phenomenal or even enigmatic, they can use their power to correct, to caricature, and to remember the dismembered society. Mama Miriam Makeba therefore used this phenomenal power to challenge the evil system of apartheid because she was fearless and grounded in Pan-Africanism.
Mama Makeba was one of South Africa's most prized exports and icons.
It is indeed befitting today that we commemorate the life of this legend and stalwart of the African struggle, Miriam Zenzile Makeba, arguably one of the most talented artists of our time that our country has ever produced. Miriam Makeba epitomizes the determination of our people to reach greater heights despite all the odds.
As a lady of song, Mama Africa's presence was expressed not only by the reverberations of her voice, but also through her vibrant African style, which she proudly donned even when exiled in the United States for more than 30 years. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
The next story may sound like we're spinning a yarn. A number of men in New York are challenging social stereotypes through knitting. It's a craft that is mostly associated with women, but it's now giving the Brooklyn men a platform to express themselves. Let's now take a look.
This is a rather interesting battlefront in the fight against sexism and gender stereotypes. Knitting has long been associated with women. But men who knit are becoming more comfortable stitching in public.
I guess growing up, I saw like my mother and my grandmother and my aunts doing stuff like this. And so I was always curious.
At the String Things studio in Brooklyn, Thursday nights are men's nights. Men join together to knit, chat, and learn from each other.
Last string of it gives me a sense of creating. It gives me a sense of accomplishment, of seeing a project, starting it from the beginning, and then seeing it through.
Men are still a small group in this knitting community, but Louis Boria wants the old attitudes to change.
You know, there's a stigma attached to knitting, where people, or society I should say, sees, the first thing people think of knitting, or crochet for that matter, there's like grandmas, right? So we come into the industry as, we're here, you know, and I always go out and I love spreading the message of that knitting, fiber arts in general, has no boundaries.
Boria started knitting about 10 years ago. He became an internet sensation in late 2017 after a photo of him knitting on the New York City subway went viral. Several media interviews helped to raise the profile of men who knit.
I realized that I had a platform, and through that platform, I was able to share my story with others about following your passion, following your dreams.
Since his internet fame, he says business has been very good. He operates the Brooklyn Boy Knits, an online retail shop that offers handmade knitted hats, scarves, and baby clothes. They sell for up to $125 a piece, earning Boria a handsome profit. Brian Toussaint, CGTN.
We are going to a short break now. We've got all the sport coming up, including Egypt dominate on home soil as 2019 Pentathlon World Cup draws to a close.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The modern pentathlon World Cup ended its first round in Egypt during the weekend. Only 2 African countries participated in the competition. Egypt's rising athlete Ahmed El Gendi surprised home fans with a gold medal, bringing Africa its only medal in the competition. Cairo has hosted the UIPM World Cup in recent years. Here's Adel El Mahrouki with more.
Cairo has become a frequent stop for the world's top modern pentathlon players every year. 159 athletes flew to the Egyptian capital this week for the first round of the 2019 International Union for Modern Pentathlon's World Cup. 31 countries have participated as it marks the beginning of the Olympics qualification season.
Since many years we have the Egyptian National Federation as our partner to organize the World Cup. And this is now the circle for the Olympic Games 2020 Tokyo, and we awarded Egypt with the city Cairo for 2019 and 2020 again to organize at the beginning of the season the World Cup here in Cairo. And for us it's always important that the first World Cup is also in such a way accepted by the nations.
Egypt had 2 men and 2 women in the final round. National team player Ahmed El Gendi made advantage of his home run and snatched the men's gold medal. Czech Republic won 2nd place and Colombia came in 3rd. In the women competition, the Russian, Irish and Hungarian flags were raised on the podium.
It's amazing to come out to my first competition this year and come second, and this is only my second kind of major medal, so I'm really delighted to start the season off this way. It was really tough and the fence was hard, and the combined was really tough, but I'm really happy I had a really fast last lap and I was able to come in second.
Egypt's Heidi Adel faced a major disappointment. She wasn't only unfortunate to win a medal, but she came in the 22nd place. That was part of the National Federation tactics, though. They've given her a ticket to Tokyo 2020 Olympics through the African competition, which Egypt routinely wins.
The African competition for us here in Egypt is not challenging enough. Our national competition is much stronger. Any player from our team who would play would easily win, and that has happened. Those who were injured, we've given them a good rest.
Pentathlon athletes will have a short rest before getting back to training. Their next fight on the Olympic seats will be in World Cup 2, scheduled in Bulgarian capital Sofia this April. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Former Manchester United star Ryan Giggs has backed acting manager Ole Gunnar Solskjaer to permanently take the Old Trafford top job, but also believes their upcoming Champions League fixture against PSG will be a hard task. Speaking at a Champions League trophy tour event in Johannesburg, Giggs said that his former teammates' record at the club speaks for itself. The Red Devils travelled to Paris needing to overturn a 2-0 deficit, and they have several players out due to injury. The Welsh national manager also spoke on the introduction of video assistant referee for the first time in the Champions League, and he throwed his support for the technology. Real Madrid's Luka Modric says that the club's forwards have failed to fill the gap left by Cristiano Ronaldo as they gear up to face Ajax Amsterdam in their UEFA Champions League last 16 second leg clash. The Croatian also added that his team lacked consistency and goals this season and needed players to step up in order to put their campaign on track. Madrid failed to score in 2 Clásicos against Barcelona last week. They were eliminated from the Copa del Rey and then fell 12 points behind the Catalan League leaders, leaving retaining the Champions League as their only realistic hope of glory. Modric also backed club record signing Gareth Bale, who has 13 goals from 33 appearances in all competitions and has struggled with persistent injury.
We cannot forget what Gareth Bale has done for this team. It seems that everything is easily forgotten, but this cannot be forgotten. Right now, he might not be at his best, but he is really eager and is working towards getting the best Gareth Bale